Welcome back to the afternoon session of the conference. Now we have the next speaker, Ms. Crystal Chai. Crystal is a PhD candidate in Innovation and Information Management at the Faculty of Business and Economics of the University of Hong Kong. Her teaching interests include data visualization and analytics, as well as operation management and social media. Her teaching case, Happy Cow Ice Cream, Data-Driven Sales Forecasting, which is a joint work with Dr. Prasanna Karhade and Tim Summers, is going to be published by the Asia Case Research Center in HKU. Let us invite Crystal.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Crystal Chai from the University of Hong Kong. It's a really great honor to be here. And actually, when I look at the list of speakers, it seems that I'm the most junior one. So I hope that, but anyway, I hope my sharing of the Happy Cow case can be valuable to you in designing the case and teaching those time series related topics. The topic of my talk is teaching time series and visualization techniques, Happy Cow Ice Cream. Before I go into the details of this case, actually I would like to share, let me see. I would like to maybe provide you some of the background of this case. This case is very freshly developed. We have just get back the comments from the editors, so to get the final editing. The course was designed actually last year, and we used for the course actually at the beginning, actually January this year. And I don't know whether you know it or not. That is in our Hong Kong U, our Faculty of Business School, we have just have a new program last year. That is the Master of Science in Business and Analytics. And so the case was designed for one of the elective courses that is called the Forecasting and Predictive Analysis. And so I am actually the teaching assistant for the course, and I worked with Dr. Prasanna Karhade, and he is an assistant professor in our school. And the course actually, because this is a one-year master program, and the course actually is very intense. Actually, we have 4 weeks, and then 4 weeks, so you can see that I say 24 hours is because we have the course on each Saturday, and then we have mornings, 3 hours in the morning, 3 hours in the afternoon, so it's a very intense class. And the course, the case we used actually is used for the actually more earlier part of this course. As we can see from the name of our course, actually we have the forecasting and predictive analysis, but actually the course, this case is more used for the time series analysis rather than the predictive part. Yeah. So, but as I mentioned, each week we have 6 hours class, but we don't use the case for the whole section. For the first week, actually we give the material to the students, because by that time we have developed the case, the reading material for the case, and I will talk about it later, what is included. And then in the second week, actually during the week, so the students get the material, get the data, so they go back to data analysis. I think that is one, but because after I listening to the talk this morning, I try to compare my understanding of the case and those kind of in-class interaction. I think it's very different from topic about the leadership or that kind of very high abstract thinking. Yeah. The data analysis actually involves students a lot of practicing. So they need to go to the field, they need to really play around with the data, so they need to have time to talk to their teammates. Actually, that is something happened after the class. So because I'm the teaching assistant for the course, so actually the students really talk to me. Maybe they don't feel that I'm very distant from them because I'm a PhD student. So they actually come to me quite often when they have problems dealing with the data. Yeah. So in the second and the third week, actually during the class we planned 1 hour section for the students to do the presentation, And also in the third week, we also provide a section to commenting on their work. The thing is, because we asked them to hand in both the report and the presentation. So because we only have 1 hour, as I just noted down, we have 54 students taken this course. So actually it's a very large class for an elective course in the master level. Yeah, basically all the students are taking this course. So I think it's quite good in that sense, but it's challenging because we have a lot of teams. So only 4 teams get the chances to present their work in the audience. So but for the other students, they still need to get the feedbacks. So we will comment on their reports individually. But we can see a lot of problems actually are the same. So I think in my teaching notes or my sharing of teaching notes, I will discuss it later. So, and in terms of the students' background, based on my experience, I don't know, maybe this is a one-time experience. Actually, the students are really from very diverse background. Some of them are from Europe, and also because they are interested in the topic, they're interested in learning this topic in this part of the world. So I think that is one thing very interesting when talking to them. But majority of them are actually freshly graduated undergrads. Yeah. Yeah. So, but some of them have work experience. So, yeah, that is also something that is very challenging when we are teaching this part. And some of them have very strong statistical background, but some of them kind of major in some social science in their undergrad. So that is something about when we are designing this case or when we are discussing teaching this one, I think is very challenging. Because some will say it's too fast, some will say it's too slow, that kind of thing. Yeah. So the evaluation are very different, but yeah. Yeah. But anyway, I will go to my case. So, as I just actually Happy Cow ice cream. It's a store. I don't know whether you have eaten this brand of ice cream before. Yeah, it's a dairy-free ice cream store. So I remember this morning, Professor talk about keeping healthy diet. So if you want to enjoy ice cream when keeping your diet, maybe you can try this one. Actually, their Hong Kong U store is their second store. But they also provide some wholesale that kind of products to the airport, to the restaurants or supermarkets. And so it's very lucky. Actually, the shop just started. Actually, in the Hong Kong U, actually started last year, March last year. So we start developing this case actually August last year. So we exactly get their sales data from March, that is the date they opened the store in Hong Kong U, to the end of September, that is 1 month after the new semester. Yeah, and the exact data we have for this time series data is 6 months, as I mentioned, March to September. And then we have their hourly total sales records, that is each hour how many cup of ice cream they have sold. And then the second data is the daily sales of each flavor. In total, they have 23 flavors, but actually they have more than that, but that is what they sold in Hong Kong U. And then each flavors, they have 3 customer label, because we know a lot of stores located in campus, actually they offer different prices to different customer groups. And actually this kind of different labels for customer groups actually is very good for us to generate insights for marketing actually. But this, I think I will show some of the pictures about that, actually because students have their own calendar, staff have their own calendar, and the tourists also have their own calendar. So the sales of these each groups actually vary very differently. Yeah. I think also, I think just now one of the professors mentioned about the culture thing. I think is one of the good things of choosing this Hong Kong store on campus is because students can very easy to make sense of it. And they can also go to the store to do some field interview with the shop managers. Yeah, so that is one thing we observe. And also it will not be very cultural related, yeah, because that is something about Happy Cow. And in terms of the teaching objectives, so I listed here 5 points here is about because this is, I put it in the beginning of this course about the time series forecasting. So we have some introduction of time series, but I think for these 5 points I want to highlight is this mindset, the visualization techniques, and the understanding of the pitfalls. I think one of the things about the problems that I get from the students in these 4 objectives, in fulfilling these 4 objectives is, for example, like when they are, when we think about the teaching time series, because we have the textbook, we all have different data sets and the questions, that kind of thing are well provided. So students, we just click, and then they get the results right away. But doing this kind of case-based data analysis project is that they need to go through a procedure. For example, they get the data, and I think I will show you a picture later here. Yeah. You need to, for example, we will give them the raw data, and then we will go through something like a procedure that is an analyst in a company that they need to go through. But this is an ideal picture, but maybe in the real world that is not always the case. But anyway, I think that is something different from finishing an assignment in data analysis course. So I will go back to this one. And another thing is, because I have just mentioned that 6 months data, why I need to highlight this one? Because this store is located on campus, right? So we can see a lot of patterns happen in a store in campus should be the activities should be correlate with an academic year, right? So we only have half of a year, so we cannot cover the full pattern of a year. But actually, ideally, it's better to have several years, then we can actually see the full patterns of the things. So I think that is one of the limitations of the data, which I will also highlight later. I think but anyway, we need to make sense of the data, because when you're hired as an analyst of a store, the store manager say, we only have this data. You cannot say, oh, I need more data, or anyway, you need to live or work with this limitation of the data. I think that is one thing that is different from teaching other topics, or using real-world data. That is one thing. You need to play with this constraint, and then maximize the benefit of this constraint. So I will talk about how we can understanding the potential pitfalls of help students understanding this one. And other thing is about the visualization techniques is when I was talking to students, they often come up with say, hey, Crystal, should I use these methods or that methods or these techniques or that techniques? It seems that they always want to get a concrete answer of which techniques is the best. But I think is one of the interesting thing is for teaching, when you are trying to teaching this analysis with the case, you don't have this perfect answer. You don't find every data set and then perfect match with an answer. So no. So that is something they need to explore. So need to feel comfortable with this kind of no definite answer to which techniques to use. Yeah. And so that is also related to the procedure thing. They need to interpret the data. I think that is the key thing of you teaching data analysis in business context. Yeah. Because before I come here, I don't know about the background of the audience, so I provide a little introduction about time series data, so that maybe you are an expert in this part, or maybe you don't have any idea. But anyway, I just provide some very basic knowledge so that we can, together we have a common background of understanding of what is time series data and what kind of techniques it's going to teach in this case. Yeah. So here is a picture actually of a time series of the exchange rates between the Hong Kong dollar and the US dollar. Yeah. So we can see here the x-axis is actually the time. Yeah, the y-axis actually is the exchange rates. So time series data basically is kind of you repeatedly observe one event. So of data, so you have this exchange rate, and then you observe it again and again, and then you come up with a time series. So that's it. And the visualization techniques we teach actually is here you can see 4 bubbles. And this, by using the visualization techniques, what we're trying to get is actually to understand these 4 elements. So these 3, actually seasonality, trend, level, actually are some systematic elements. That is, something may happen again in the future, something again may happen in the future. And then the noise elements is unsystematic elements. That is, something may just happen once. Yeah. And so these 4, on this side, there are some techniques that we are going to teach. Actually, we teach in tutorials, but students need to apply them during they are using the case. And so I give an example of one of the techniques, for example, like this zooming in. Actually, for example, when you have a very prolonged time series, and actually you can also explore only a very short phrase of this time series, and then to see the more local pattern of these events. So that is the very short introduction of time series and the analytics techniques we are going to teach in this case. So the following, I will talk about this case. The first is the reading material. Actually, we have, as I have mentioned in the first class, the reading is often happen outside the class. So here is what we use. The first thing is the first version of our case. Actually, just now I have downloaded that. The main things here included in this in the case description actually is the interviews of Mary, that is the CEO of Happy Cow, and also some information from the Prem, the shop owner, the shop manager, and also we also listed some factors that may affect the sales. That is all this kind of some background information for students they can help students to interpret the data when they are exploring the data. Yeah. So I will try to, so this is, I just show some of them. Actually, the case has been developing and still, I think we have gone through some revision here, but to give you some idea about what we provide, actually. We didn't talking about which techniques, what you need to do, and then in the description of the case. But we try to help the students to make sense of this context of these companies, of the data, possibly the data set. So we can see the consumer type. There are ideas of the flavor, because we have the flavor data. And then the inventory control system. I think one of the very minor thing is in the store, I mentioned they have 23 flavors, right? But actually in the store, you cannot display all of them. So actually you only have 8 cans of that ice cream. So they sold in group. So that may affect the sales. And yeah, we have 3 groups of customers. Yeah, we have some interviews with the manager. That is all the people that may have some idea or understanding of how the shop operates. And also one thing is the promotion and events. This kind of ad hoc thing actually will add variation to the data. Actually, it will be very helpful for the students to making sense of why this will happen in the data. Yeah. And actually, I will show you one of the things. And then actually, we kind of make up a role, that is Susan Chen. That is, you are a hired data analyst of the Happy Cow. So you need to maybe come up with a solution. But actually, we later revise that part. But anyway, just give you some hints of this. Hong Kong. And so, yeah, this is the store kind of exhibits. this is how the ice cream is sold, the flavors, and then they have different, you can see these 3 columns. Actually, they have 3 different cells for the different group. Yeah. And so we also provide the university calendar, so they can understand why this data on this date will perform like this way. So that is something information we try to provide as much as possible. But actually, we didn't tell ahead which data will be useful. Yeah, but it really that is the part of the teaching. Not teaching notes. This is the case description. So we will go back to. So this is the first part of. The first part of it, the reading materials. And the second part is actually we also make use of this kind of external reading. And I think that this morning some speaker also mentioned about the tailoring the case. So I think that is, I put it here is just for a reference. So maybe you have, when you teach the case by yourself, maybe you may have different source. But I think my experience is I think these two are quite good. And actually, the textbook by Shimali, Professor Shimali, actually she's a professor in the National Tsinghua Taiwan and a good friend of Prasanna, our main instructor of the course. Yeah, so actually now I think they have the third edition. By the time we use, I think we have already used the third edition. This one is I think the cover page of the second one. And then for the HBR guide, actually, this one, actually, they have a lot of small chapters. I don't know whether you have read this one before, but maybe you can take a look on this one if you are also teaching some data visualization related topics. They are very easy to read. So each chapter is like 3 to 4 pages, not very long, but they each discuss some very interesting issues when you are doing analysis in the companies. Yeah, I think it's very helpful for these sources. This picture actually I get from one of the chapter of the HBR case. But as I just mentioned a little bit, is actually when the things goes, actually not everything really happened that perfect, that linear. Yeah, I think for the case teaching is identify the question. Yeah, that is something the job student need to identify. We also give them some guidance about very general question. So I will show you what the question we provided in this one. And then students need to define the data, and they need to collect the data, of course, we have already provided them, so that is a little bit different. So plot the data, they need to actually, this path, I think from the plot the data, summary, implication, interpret, all these things actually is back and forth. They are not, you cannot do that perfect, that linear. Actually, you need to come back and forth. And then the interpretation, actually, the latest 3 parts are interpretation. So I think that is something that students can experience with this kind of case-based data analysis teaching. And so so now I will come to the data part. The data we have, actually, I have mentioned just now, is we just provide them the raw data of these 2 data sets. One is the hourly sales data, The other is the daily sales data of all the ice cream flavors across different consumer groups. So, but you can see here, I write in the case, actually that's what we did. We only provide them 5 months. We take 1 month out. Yeah, so why do we do that? I think that is one of the things I would like to share maybe in the future when you use a teaching case in terms of the data analysis. Because when you are adopting a case, you don't want to use the case for one time, right? You want to use it in the future in other classes as well. But the students may communicate. I think in the undergraduate level or master level anyway, they can communicate, so it's very easy. So we don't want to just replicate every results from their predecessor. So you can't, but we cannot manipulate the data, right? But we can take some of the, we don't need to provide them the full data set. Maybe this year you provide them the March to August. Next year you provide April to September. Or anyway, you can have some variation. You can, and then each semester or each batches of students, they will get different results. Yeah, so they will not, they don't have the whole picture, you have the whole picture. So, and also actually because this time, one of the limitations is we only have 6 months. Maybe in the future you may luckily get some case that have a very long period. I think you can also do some prediction, and then you can also ask students to do some prediction, and then actually say you can vary the length. Actually, maybe in the very beginning you only give them 6 months. Later you give them another 6 months. But maybe the next year when you're teaching the same case, you give them 9 months, and then leave the other 3 months to them. So actually, I think that is one thing you can play around with this data provided by the case. You don't need to replicate everything in every batches of students. Yeah, and also one very interesting thing is because we only have this 5 months data, we cannot make very meaningful prediction. Yeah, so that is one thing maybe I can talk a little bit later. So, yeah, so as I just mentioned, we give the student the raw data, and they need to really clean up the things, because the thing happen is they often come back to me and say, I don't know how to, what does it mean? I don't know how to clean this up, actually. But actually, most of the team doesn't come back to me, but some of them will. But I think it's a very meaningful thing for them to really play around with the raw data, because this is the dirty work with data analysis. But actually in the textbook examples, always they will provide you some pre-processed data set. That is, you just put the things in the analysis tools, and then everything is perfect. Yeah, so that is something dirty work they need to go through. I think that's something interesting for this case-based analysis teaching. You need them to do the dirty work. Yeah, and then the outliers. I think outliers and potential pitfalls, that is something I want to highlight with this data. So why about outliers? I think the thing is not everything will happen perfectly. Let me see if I provide you a perfect case. Yeah, I put here, actually, yeah, this is a real world data. This is also real world data. So you can see here, I just remember at the very beginning, I mentioned to you some time series elements. You want to see some systematic elements that can happen again and again in the future, right? And then a perfect trend coming, a little bit increasing, right? And then the seasonality that is repeated seasonally. Let me tell you, this is the data of the vehicles in the US, the traffic, the vehicle, the number of vehicles or something. I think it's something about the traffic, yeah. That is something, because every year, maybe in the December, there's a peak, a lot of people traveling, and maybe and then later it goes down. That is something that is, if nothing special happens, it will repeat again and again. That is something, the data we get from the textbook, right? But the data we get from the real world is like this one. That is one of the data. Actually, as I mentioned, we have 3 groups of customers, right? This is the time series data for the sales of the others, that is non-Hong Kong U student, non-staff, that kind of sales. So we can see, when we visualize it, we see this very skyrocketing sales on this date. So actually, we can identify it as something really a noise, something that may not happen. It's not the average sales. So students, actually, to make sense of this one, they need to either read the case. If they cannot find the meaningful information from the case we provided, they actually go to the sales manager. They go to the sales manager. Actually, there are more than this outlier. You can actually, outlier is the one that perform very different from others, right? So actually, there are many points. So you can explore, the students can decide which meaningful outliers they want to interpret and may generate some marketing implication to offer to their CEOs. I think that is one thing is the real world and the textbook examples. Yeah, and for that event actually is a Buddhism event on that day. Remember, the ice cream is a dairy-free ice cream, so it's okay for the Buddhists to enjoy the ice cream. So you can see actually they also like to, they also want to enjoy life, right? Yeah, so on that day, actually, I bought some ice cream. Okay, you can also see the taste they like is banana, green tea, and sesame. Yeah, that kind of thing. So it's very interesting when we really try to interpret the data, especially those outliers. And also one thing is, oftentimes when we are teaching in those non-business contexts, outliers is something we try to take away, we try to ignore. That is because they may not happen again in the future. But in the business context is something that maybe it can be a chance for a marketing event. So that is something that the students can interpret, can try to do more work other than only play around with the data. And the potential pitfalls. Here I list two issues. One is information overloading, the other is interpretation. Actually, we have just talking a little bit about the limitation of the data. And that is the length of the data is quite short. And then another thing is one thing is student over-interpret the data. As I say, is the student will try to one of the techniques of this time series visualization is drawing a trend line. That is how the things, smoothing those zigzag, those kind of things. We see the trend line, how the things increase and decreasing. So some students will try to interpret every ups and downs to over-interpret those kind of trends. So maybe some of these ups and downs is just noises. So that is something that the student needs to, when they interpret the data, they need to think about that and what we try to remind them. And then another thing is the information overloading. So actually, I will have some examples here. Oh, this one. So actually, we see a lot when we see the students' report and their presentation. Actually, when you see it, you can basically see nothing, right? Because just imagine if I put it into black and white, you can basically see nothing. Yeah, but that is something we really see the students doing. They will feel that, oh, the visualization techniques is just plotting. So they don't need to think about the audience. Actually, it's you cannot see each flavors, although you put all of them together. Yeah, so it's very terrible thing. Yeah, so it's something that is more than the visualization techniques. So the potential pitfall, the students doing visualization. So that is some highlights in terms of the issue related to this data and our case. And then another thing is about designing the questions. Here is, I put some of the questions we use for this case. I think this is one of the difference I see is maybe the question for this analysis is something happened before, and then the student needs to play around with the data, and then we need to encourage them to come up with a story, and then to go to the field to further interpret the results. And I think one of the balance we need to achieve is the question need to be open-ended as well as to be instructive. Because if it is too open-ended, so they don't know what things to come out, what conclusion to come out. If it's too instructive, they will do everything the same with each other. Yeah, so that is something when we are designing the case we try to consider. And actually, I think based on the presentation and the reports from the student, we can see our question really can achieve this one. Although they are answering all these questions, they try to explore the sales performance of the three groups, and then they also try to finding the outliers, comparing the flavors, but actually they are doing things very differently. So I think that is, and also the outliers, this kind of thing. Different groups, they have different criteria for finding or defining outliers and interpreting outliers. Yeah. And then this is the picture I have just showed before. I think this is an ideal thing in the company. You can identify a question and define what question to collect, and then ask the team to support you, all kind of thing. But in this case teaching, so maybe you don't have the freedom to recollect the data again. So you need to live with this limitation. Yeah. But you can do more work to interpret that. Yeah, that is what I just mentioned. That is, you cannot get the additional data again. That is something you need to we need to bear in mind. Yes. Yeah, another thing is I want to highlight here is based on my experience of this teaching is I think doing the same case really provide a very good common background for the discussion. As I mentioned before, a lot of work are done outside the class, right, the analysis. And also it's very difficult to really lead in the discussion in this kind of analytical class because we are teaching the techniques, right? So, but the thing is when they are playing with the same data set and they are basically the big direction are the same. So actually they will feel, when they are listening to others' presentation, actually they will be more attentive because they found that we are doing the same thing but a little bit different. So we also overcome this kind of problem during we are playing around with this case. So how you think about that? So that is actually this case become very good common ground for the students to discuss about the issues during this data analysis, this case. But also we can see, this, as I mentioned, this set of questions really achieve a very good of common ground and the differences that the students we can see, because I mentioned we teach a set of visualization techniques, but actually they will use differently. Some of them will explore very heavily on the seasonality because you can see from we have Monday to Saturday, we have the peak hour, peak day for sales. Right? So, but some of the group will totally ignore this information. So that is, we can see this variation. So which techniques they decide to use. And also how they're defining the outliers and making sense of the data. And this is, I put examples here. Actually, later I can put more examples from my teaching notes. This is one of the examples, although this is not a time series one. As I previously mentioned, I show you a picture about the overloading issue. Remember the very terrible flavor line chart? Yeah. And this one actually, I think, is a very good example from the student, how they tackle with the information overloading. They kind of categorize the flavors into different groups. Manageable group, I think, is 7 something. And then they put the labels right in the chart. Actually, some of them just put away from it. So you need to link back and forth and then to know which performs what. And then this one, they also provide the details of each flavors. I think the key point is actually when you want to go to the details, you can come to here. But if you want to just see the general performance of the flavors, you can come to this one. Yeah, so I think it's, actually, let's go back to one of the questions we have is we ask them to do the groupings to overcome we try to lead them to overcome the information overloading, but not all the groups really get this part. Yeah. Yeah, so this is, I just provide some snapshot of the classroom. So we can see, actually I think we have 9 groups of students. Each group, we kind of reformatting the table. Yeah, because now we have this kind of classroom setting everywhere. Yeah, so each group, they form a table, and then one of the group is doing presentation here, and yeah, so this is a very big classroom you can see. Yeah, so maybe before that, I can show you the basic layout of the teaching notes, because this is, I just got back from the editor's comments, but I have hide that mark, so you can see I have a lot of unediting thing. So this is, I think, because Anna told me that some of you may be interested in how to designing this kind of teaching notes for a data analysis class. Yeah, so the first thing is the synopsis, something you need to match back to your case. That is the background, Susan and Mary, that kind of thing. And then the background, this part, basically what I write is about very key information that is helpful. Because in the case I show you at the beginning, actually you include a lot of information. Some are relevant, some are maybe not. Yeah, so, but here I will just pick out some of the relevant information to really know about to help you to do the analysis. And then we have the teaching objectives, our teaching plan. We describe the data set we have. Actually, we do this one in 2 courses. We also do this one in the undergrad level. But what I just introduced is on a master level. Yeah. And then you can always tailor that. And then this is each module. Actually, because we also include some, as I mentioned, I also help to design the whole courses. So actually, this also including some other materials in the other part of the teaching. Okay, yeah, so this is basically the end of this one. So we have each assignments. So actually, the teaching notes has more than what I share. Yeah. Yeah, so each module, I will give some recommendation and tips for teaching this module. And for the assignments, I will also have the comments for each assignment, some examples from the students' homework, and my comments. And here I show you one of the structure of this kind of comments. I have the comments from me, actually, and the persona. And then we would say what is good here, what's the room to improve, and this is the original text here. And this is the contributor, actually the students, the name of the students who give this example. So some of the examples are from the report, some of the examples are from their presentation. So you may find a little bit different. So each questions we designed, as you can see, each question we designed, we will provide the examples here. So we can see this group of students actually explored an outlier from a very different way. They try to explore which day is a very special day. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and also you can see this one, although they also have the issue of overloading, I can also see which line is what. But actually they put a label here so it can help me to still get to reduce that overloading problem. So we also hint some other issue. Oh yeah, so this is a general picture of how these 3 groups of customers perform differently. So you can see this one actually is the students. So why? It's because students leave in the summer and then they come back, that kind of thing. And so this actually is the staff, because they have this peak, because during the exam week, they need to really have the ice cream to really free themselves. Yeah, and so this one actually is the tourist. So I think that is very Hong Kong, a Chinese culture thing. That is, during the summer holiday, parents will take the students to take kids to the university. So maybe in the future, they want to get enrolled in the Hong Kong U. So that is something I think is, when we discuss from the students from foreign country, they will feel this is a very special thing that is, yeah, happen. Yeah. So that is also, finally, I also highlight some key takeaway for this one. Yeah, so I think my time is basically over. Yeah, so I will just conclude it soon. Yeah, the thing is, I think is, I only have 2 things to highlight. Maybe turn the limitation of the data set to be a good experience for the students. Yeah, and then another thing is from data analysis to sense making. Because I think in the business context, we cannot highlight everything because when I'm doing time series data analysis in research, we need to get a lot of additional tests for the rigorousness. But for this kind of interpretation and analysis, actually, we don't need to really do that. We don't highlight that much. But it's more important to whether you generate some insights to do the sense making out of the data. So I think that is very different. So finally, I have a quote from Professor David Garvin. I think it's very helpful when I try looking back of my experience of designing this teaching case. I think the case-based teaching, why this technique is enduring, is because it teaches beyond the subject matter, teaches you to think and to persuade, to listen and respond, and a very good second-place solution for getting that reality in front of the students. Yeah, so I think is what I also echoes what I feel about that. Yeah, thank you very much. That's mine.
All right. Thanks, Crystal, for a very interesting case using ice cream and to teach data analytics, which is a very hot topic nowadays and can be very difficult to teach. But they try to contextualize the information and make it more interesting to motivate students to learn. Do you have any questions from the floor?
How popular case-based teaching is in Hong Kong U? I mean, who initiated this one?
Initiate what?
Who proposed that you need to do a case to do all the teaching?
Oh, persona. That is, the key main instructor for this case is persona. Also, we also working with the Jeroen. Actually, is the head of our ACRC, the Asian Case Research Center in Hong Kong U. Actually, because I'm a PhD student, but actually we locate in the same office because the room is very big, so we are in the same room. And the initiator, I think, is Jeroen and the persona. They are initiating this one, and then I get involved. Yeah. I think also Mary. Remember, we have an interview with Mary, and also I think it's also a little bit ad hoc thing. Yeah, Mary is also involved. She is very interested in helping these things out because you can see we get the cells from March to September, and then we designing this case, and then we exactly use in January. So it's very short. So during these several months, we talk to Mary, we talk to Prem, and then to design the question, everything is going through very intense. And because my major job in this one is I explore the data, I found some interesting issue with the data, and then I talk to the professors and talk to Jeroen, the head of the ACRC, so they can see what is interesting when I was playing around with this data. So I'm the first one who to getting this data, getting some conclusion, preliminary one, and then so I really experience as a student, so what will happen when I really get this set of data. So that is why I will really mention about this outlier and the limitation things. Because when we get the data, we really, at the first time in August, we cannot expect. And the one thing is why I leave the September thing is because previously, as our course mentioned, it's a predictive course. Right? We were trying to predict our future cells so we can plan our future cells, right? This is very ideal. But the thing is, as I can see, the students actually, they live in the August. So if you kind of predict it like a traditional time series methods, actually you can see if things going down, maybe in the future it's still going down, right? But actually, if you think about the calendar of the student, actually in the September, student will come back. So the cells of student will come up, right? So that is something, it will be not very reasonable if we use this section of data set for the prediction, that it will really involves a lot of issues. So it's not very, I think it's not very scientific.
Question.
So.
Does this slow down your progress in publishing referee cited journals? Because publishing a case, it doesn't count publication.
Oh,
right?
You mean
Does it increase your
student?
workload, or why you have to do it? Because if you don't do the case, you have more time to work on your research paper.
Yeah, of course, that is what you mentioned, but that is something I think is interesting, so I still do that. So yeah, this morning I get out at 5 o'clock writing my own paper, and then I spend 1 hour preparing this, adding more slides. And also last night I asked Anna, so what kind of question maybe the audience may feel interesting? Yeah, I need to struggle, yeah. Yeah. If you say why, I think it's interest, yeah. Thank you.
Hello. Wow, I'm very interested for your data to apply for your case study, especially for such a short time, something like 24 hours for 4 weeks. You apply for the time series data. It's supposed is based on the empirical, based on the heuristical data to compare for the reason. So for such a short time, how do you encourage your student to participate? To do the prediction for the preference of the ice cream?
I think along the case, actually, we didn't really ask the student to do the prediction using this data, because I say because of the limitation of the data, so it's not fit this purpose. Yeah, we need to see that. Another thing is the prediction thing. Actually, we have other data set. So in terms of the whole cost, if I understand your question correctly, is in terms of the whole cost. So the prediction part, actually we use other things. For this one, actually we use in the earlier part for the analysis techniques. There's something.
So you just try to, encourage the student understand try to use the, statistical data to apply for the case study, right?
Cost data, you mean?
Yeah, because based on what you mentioned about you have some sorts of another set of the data for the student to apply and then try to apply another new case,
yeah. I think maybe the thing is this is only this case. So for the whole course, actually later we ask them to do another project using their own interesting data set. Yeah. So actually that is after they finish this project and then they do another project. Yeah, so it's, I see, that's a very, very intense workload for them and for this course.
Thanks.
Yeah. So maybe we can talk later.
You treat it as a project. That means you have a few projects in the course using this kind of case.
Oh, I think is whether I mentioned it correctly is in the beginning of the second week, actually Persona provide a list of company contact information for the students. They can freely to contact this list of, because you can see in the Cyberport there are a lot of new startups, right? They are interested in, and not only this startup, but also other companies. So the students, they can feel free to choose which company to work with, and then to contact them, and then to get the data from them, and then to do a real world project at the end of this course. So actually they get another really case-based experience. It's because they really talk to the companies. They really need to do the analysis again, and then to come up with a very new set of conclusions. It's very diverse. Actually, some of them doing some finance, some of them doing some health-related topics. I remember one is something like mindfulness. They get the devices and then to really check the heart blood and those kind of thing. They cooperate with a company, a startup company, doing this kind of meditation coach. Yeah. So I think also the most of the students get some from the food industries. In Hong Kong, a lot of this kind of food deliveries, this kind of startup, they are also interesting. They have this kind of time series data. So that it will be another very interesting set of things to discuss. So that is, I don't know whether I answer your question, but yes, students do one project right directly and then another project right after. Basically, it's 2 weeks, one project, 2 weeks, one project. You can imagine. It's very intense, yeah.